continuing on with lessons in style, write powerful and beautiful sentences, brought to you by Master Edit, which you can check out the cool software in the description. Just click on the link for the Master Edit. Really cool, I recommend it. And before going on with the different varied ways to write sentences and looking at examples here from a really good writer, Lois Bujold, and this is her book, Curse of Shallyan. It's a fantasy novel. I wanted to make a quick comment before getting into like subordination and stuff. And that was, if you follow the rules or the suggestions that are given so far, these same suggestions which you can find in Style by Joseph Williams, is that the first one was to have your subjects be doers or have your doers be subjects. Have them doing something, so have actions as verbs. If you do that, you're going to write active sentences and not passive sentences. But there are times where you can have a more active sentence and a less active sentence. It's just by using weak verbs. If you use like a weak verb like made or was or had, you can have a weaker sentence. But if you use a stronger verb saying exactly what that person is doing, you have a more active sentence. But just real quick, the difference then between active and a passive sentence would be like Jack kicked the ball was kicked by Jack. So when you have something like the ball was kicked by Jack, then you have a passive sentence. Because the doer is not the subject. The doer is Jack. He's the doer. He's doing something. He's kicking the ball. The ball is the one being acted upon. It's usually the object. But here it's being used as a subject. That is, it comes at the beginning of the sentence. And so that's called a passive sentence. Anyway, so you want to avoid passive sentences. You want to write mostly active. And so if you follow those rules that we've gone through, you'll write mostly active sentences. Okay, so let's go through some examples here. We don't have to go any farther to see subordination than her first sentence. And that is the word before is being used to connect to this full sentence, he saw them. In her first draft, perhaps she had these three short sentences. Sazriel heard the mounted horsemen on the road before, or on the road, period. He saw them, period. He glanced over his shoulder, period. And when you're writing your first draft, write whatever comes naturally to you. Now, the more you revise, and then just like do like you're practicing, where you just practice writing sentences, the first time, writing a paragraph with a bunch of various sentences the first time, the better your mind will get at thinking that way, and the more, basically you write the way you think. So the more you train your brain to think a certain way, if you train your brain to think using subordination, and that becomes the way you talk, it will become the way you naturally write. But until then, it won't be. So don't stress yourself out. Just write what comes natural. Then go back and edit. And as you're editing, you can look for things like that. And maybe that's what she did, and she saw, the three short sentences, no good. I need to combine two of these sentences. How can I combine he saw them and Khazrel heard the mounted horsemen on the road? Well, we know that, one could happen before the other. And so this is one of the easiest ways to do subordination, is using words of time. And if you look at your favorite authors, you'll see they do this often. And the words they use is like before is a common word, another one is when, another one is after, and phrases like as soon as. So this now becomes a subordinate clause. Before he saw them. Before he saw them is subordinate. That is, it can't stand alone. It needs to connect to something to make sense. And now it makes sense when it's connected. So she used a subordination right there in the beginning. This is called a complex sentence. Then we have a simple sentence. He glanced over his shoulder. Now another way to vary up your sentences, and this is actually, I don't think this next one is a good example because the parenthetical is too long and it interrupts something that is not so easily flows one together, and it doesn't really flow the ideas together. I like parentheticals that actually, though they're interrupting a clause, they flow the information one to the other. And this is not a good example. Nonetheless, you'll see what it is. The well-worn track behind him curled up around the rolling rise. What passed for a heel on these high, windy plains? That's like just thrown in afterthought. Doesn't need to be there. Really, this first part and second part is the full sentence. That is, the well-worn track behind him curled up around the rolling rise before dipping again into the late winter muck of Boasea or Beosoa's bony soil. So that would be the full sentence. So this other part then was parenthetical, not needed information. And I think in that sentence it just interrupts the flow of it personally. Another way you can do it is by adding variety. Notice that most sentences will start with nouns, pronouns, or determiners. Nouns, pronoun, the determiner, and then now we have a preposition, at. And so you have these kind of phrases like prepositional phrases and adjective phrases and so forth. And phrases are important. At his feet a little reel. That doesn't make any sense by itself, so it's not dependent. It's not independent. It's a dependent phrase. And it's not a clause because there's no verb. So at his feet a little reel, too small and intermittent, I don't know why that word is hard to say. To rate a culvert or a bridge trickled greenly across the track from the sheep crop pastures above. So here you have this introductory phrase, which is dependent. Nonetheless, though, it's serving as like a subject, the little reel, and then it's interrupted, so she uses another interruption. But this is actually a good interruption, I think. That is, the too small and intermittent to rate a culvert or a bridge trickled greenly across the track from the sheep crop pastures above. So one way then you could get rid of the same old of starting your sentences, and most of your sentences will start with subjects like, nouns, pronouns, and determiners like the and a and an. You'll have sentences that start with prepositions or with words of time. So in other words, words of time replace before, when, after, at, on, over, so forth. And as you look through your favorite authors, you'll see they'll use those types of sentences a lot to start, or phrases a lot to start a sentence, and also it's a way to write complex sentences. So that's what we're looking at here too, is a way to write complex sentences, and we can see that most of our sentences so far were complex sentences. Not complex as in difficult, although they just happen to be the hardest to write well. Actually, maybe a good compound sentence, like with a lot of parallel structure, that would be a compound complex sentence probably, though, most likely. But even so, that might be harder to write well. Okay. We have another sentence with the determiner. And after that, another sentence with the determiner. Okay, and then we have a sentence starting with not bandits. Basically, we'll just say bandits, And then he, another determiner, the, their. So you can start to see that, mostly it's, either determiners or nouns or pronouns. Here another noun. Then we get to. Now, I wanted to show this example here because someone might easily write, Cyril was surprised that their captain held up a hand as they came near. That might be a sentence that a lot of people would write, and I'm just going based on, I do a lot of reviewing and stuff on different writing sites. And so, I notice that writers write sentences like that a lot because they just come easy to you, right? So, Cyril was surprised. So, you have the word was. And it's like, well, wait a minute. Let's try to remove the word was. And even if you try to remove the word was and just said, well, their captain surprised Cyril or something like that when he held up a hand. So that's one way you can do it. Their captain surprised Cyril when he held up a hand as they came near. So you can take sentences like that and go, well, how can I reword it? What can I put a short phrase with? And so this is one way you can do it. To Cyril's surprise, their captain held up a hand as they came near. So you can think of when you write. Oh, I'm out of time, so we'll come back with the next part. Go ahead and check out the link to Master Edit.